My name is Claudia Cohen, and I'm here to talk about Exam 2, Practice Question 1, which is all about how loops end up printing out when they are displayed on an exam. So, one of the common misconceptions that a lot of people have about these types of problems are the fact that they try to jump ahead to other lines of the code when they are reading them, and in order to efficiently analyze what your code will be printing out, you must make sure that you take each line of code one by one, the same way a computer takes each code line by one. So, the way that I've also prepared to understand this question, to especially study loops and everything, was to do Lab 7 and Homework 7 from Professor Chen's CSE02 class. Anyway, so we can get started on what exactly a loop is. So it's basically a series of instruction that is continually repeated until a certain condition is met. And once that condition is met, the loop will finish and move on to the next instruction. And if the condition is not met, it will return to the first instruction, and then the loop will run again. So another tricky part of this question that I discovered while I was solving it was the concept of infinite loops, where you need to be aware of the fact that, if the condition is always true, the loop will continuously run until there's a timer set or someone manually stops this loop from running. So the two different types of loops that are mostly focused on in this question are the while loops, and here's an example of a while loop where this basically says that the integer count starts at 0, and while count is less than 5, we will print out the statement, "Welcome to Java," and then count will increase by 1, meaning that the 0 will turn into a 1 after the first time, and it will continue to print this statement until we get to the number 5. But we will be running it from 0 to the number 5, and when we compare 5 to 5, they're equal, so the loop will finish running. The other type of loop that we deal with in this problem are the for loops, where basically this says, for the integer x is equal to 0, you will run this loop until as long as x is less than 100, and every time that you run this loop, you will increment x by 1. And for this one, you will be printing out 0 to 99. So we can get started with our question now that we understand the basics of loops. So this first one is so we see that integer I is equal to 0, and when int I equals 7, as long as integer I is greater than 0, you are going to decrement I by 3. So the first time that we run through 7, we print out I colon 7, and then after this is done, we're going to subtract 3, and then we go down to 4, and then we run the loop again, and the int I of 4 will print as I colon 4. Then we run it again, and then our numbers becomes from 4 down to 1 because we did 4 minus 3. And then we print out I colon 1. And then the last time that this loop runs, 1 minus 3 is negative 2. And because negative 2 is less than 0, we will not print anything. I found that making a chart is extremely helpful to be able to follow all of the different places. So we print part A like this. It's very similar in the same situation, except for this time when int I is equal to negative 1, and as long as I is greater than 0, but because int I is negative 1, we automatically know that this will not print anything because negative 1 will never be greater than 0. So, as you can see, that's the way it is. Alright, next part C, integer I is equal to 1 and integer j is equal to 0. And we see that for integer I equals 1, it will keep continuously running as long as I is less than 6. And every time it runs, j will increase by 1. And then the minute that j is greater than 3, we're going to end the loop. And we can go and we jump down to our print statement and see that I colon value of I is printed out. So as you can see from this example here, we see that that each time that so I basically prints out, and then we at the end of this statement we are going to increment j by 1, and then the integer I just stays the same because there's no effect on integer I throughout the for loop, and we keep increasing j until we finally get to j is equal to 3, and then when we add 1 to it, j is equal to 4, and 4 is greater than 3, so then we break the loop and we print nothing. So that's why this will be our print statement for part C. So this example actually proves us that this is an infinite loop, and we know this after going through each line. We realize that as we are increasing and we have started with 1, we have I will always be greater than 0, which means the loop will continuously keep running. So part E is basically saying that integer I is equal to 10, and while a condition is true, which basically means that it will run forever unless if something breaks it, basically it will tell us that it will always be true. So we do I colon and then decrease the value of I by 1, and then if I is ever less than 0, we end the loop. So this is why, for example, when we start off, we could do 10. I guess we would print out I colon 10, and then we would minus 1 by 10, and then we would have 9, and then we print out 9 colon 9. And then we go all the way down to the bottom where we have 0 running in the loop, and I colon 0 is 0, and then we print this out, and then once I is less than 0, well, because of this whole thing, we're going to break the loop. So it's over when it becomes -1. So therefore nothing will print out at that point. So here is our print statement. Then for part F, we have integer I starts off at 0, and this is completely acceptable to have a colon here because we know a semicolon there because we know that this value will go here and is established just up there. And then we know that as long as I is less than 30, we're going to add 5 to each value. And every time we print, we're going to print out the value colon, and then whatever the variable is, like whatever I is equal to, divided by 4, and that remainder will be printed out. So for example, we'll be doing 0 will run through it. So then we add 5 to the 0 after it goes through the for loop. Then that becomes 5. So then we run the 5 through the for loop, and when int equals 5, yes, it's less than 30. We print out value for 5 divided by 4, and that remainder is 1. So we print out value colon 1, and that will just continuously running until we finish 25. We increment by 5, and that becomes 30. And because 30 is not less than 30, the loop is finished, and we go on to the next function afterwards. So this is what the print statement would look like for part F. So next we go to part G, and we start reading int I is equal to 10, while as long as I is greater than 0, if I divided by the number 2, whatever that remainder is equal to 0, that's actually equivalent to the number being even, then we continue. And the minute the continue exits the loop, it will continue to the next bracket, which means that this loop will actually be over immediately at this statement. So, especially because 10 is even, it's done. So for part H, we have an example where int I equals 0, and it says do the print statement I colon 2 times I, and then you're going to add 1 after this runs, and then at the same time I needs to be less than 3. So as you can see from our statement, we run 0 through it, and 2 times 0 is 0, and that's our print statement, I colon 0. And then if we do int I is equal to 1, we do I plus, I'm going to print out I colon 2 times 1, and that's going to be I colon 2, and we can keep incrementing by 1 until we get to the bottom, where we have integer I is equal to 3, and because 3 is not less than 3, the loop is over. And these are our print values. Next, for part I, very similar situation to the other examples that we've had in this problem. For integer I is equal to 0, as long as I is less than 3, we will print out the system.out.print statement, and then we will increment by 1. So for the first one, we run 0 through the loop, and we get I colon 4 plus I, so 4 plus 0 would be 4, and we have I plus 4. We add 1 to I, running 1 through the for loop, and up until we have to run 3 through the for loop, because 3 is not greater than 3, and it will not print anything when it gets up to 3, which means we exit the for loop, and these are our values printed in part I. Next, we go on to part J, and int I is 2 and j is 3. While I times j is greater than 0, then we will print out the sum, the word sum, colon j plus I. And then we will minus 1 from I and minus 1 from j. And then we will run these new values through to the while loop. So, as you can tell from the first one, we see that 2 times 3 is a positive number, and then we run them through the while loop, and then we print out sum colon the sum of the two values, and that would be 5 because 2 plus 3 is 5, and then we finish and decrement each one of them by 1, bringing us down to 1 and 2. And then we run both of those values through the while loop. And then once we decrement 1 by 1, we get 0. And 0 times 1 is not greater than 0. It's actually 0. So then we finish our loop, and here is our print statement. So thank you so much for tuning in today about loops. I hope you learned how to do these things, and thank you again, and I hope you do well on whatever exam you're studying for.